I waited till the music was over that time. I messed that up last hour. All right, hey guys, let me remind you about the budget. 2 weeks from today, that's real important. I know a lot of times, really you don't hear much about it unless there's a problem, and there is no problem. But it is important. We love having people informed financially in the life of our church. I just find out it just cuts down on any misunderstanding. And so 2 weeks we'll vote on that as a church. It's one of the few things we vote on. And it's all out there. Every detail you want to know about is out there, right? They even have a meeting that'll answer your questions. But that'll happen 2 weeks today. But I also want to tell all of you, everybody watching at home, everybody here today, I want to give God the glory and praise. But we've had a wonderful financial year. It just has been incredible. But also want to thank you, man, for your faithfulness. And because it has been, these last few years have been wonderful compared to what all the country's going through. So I just wanted to tell you that. So we will actually finish, because I always like to use this time to kind of educate you on how we do things. Our budget year goes from July 1st to the end of June, right? June 30th. So it's a little different. So it's about to end here in a few weeks. But we do that because we have a school, right? It just makes it easier to keep everything together. So that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. Great. So anyway, today it is kind of fallen to me. We have been talking through this creed to the things that we believe, the things we believe and why we believe them. And it's been a wonderful series. It really has. I love walking through things because so many times we've known things for so long and we don't even look at them or question them. And it's so easy to misrepresent and miss what they mean. And so today we're getting to the point to where it's been assigned, I'm doing baptism in the Lord's Supper. And I'll share about those today, and then we'll finish. Aaron's going to actually, we're going to do communion today together, the Lord's Supper. But I want to talk to you about them, and I'm going to ask you to do something that's going to be real hard for you to do. Now, if you're kind of new to church or new to this whole thing, then this is not going to be a problem for you. But if you come in here being in church all of your life or being in whatever, it's amazing. Even in the church I grew up in, it's amazing the baggage we put on all these things, religious baggage. And I love just sharing what the scriptures teach. What do they teach? Right? And what does this mean? And so I have baptism and the Lord's Supper, and you just saw the baptism part, and I want to talk to you about what those things are. And we have a couple of those. And when you understand what they are, it really does clear things up. But today's title is pictures. Pictures. Now, if you want to know what a baptism is and what the Lord's Supper is, they're pictures. We talk about this often, but a lot of times, if we've done something so long, we don't even listen. We listen to or help to understand what it is. It's just part of our mind, just goes into it, and what we've always known, what we've always thought, just kind of stays in place. But what I'm going to ask you to do is to look at this fresh from the scriptural perspective. But these are pictures, and obviously they're pictures, and we'll see what that means just in a minute. But remember that pictures are not the real thing, right? I want you to think on that for a second. Even an uncomfortable pause, all right? Pictures are not the real thing, and you're like, well, duh, Jeff. Yeah, but do you know how many times people have taken baptism and the Lord's Supper, pictures, and make it the real thing, right? And whenever you and I, see the scriptures teach, Jesus himself says that the Lord searches to find those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. not in all of the symbols and the examples. So when you look at these things, like what we're talking about today, when you talk about symbols, pictures, whatever you are, they're representations of the real thing, right? But they're there for a purpose. And pictures are an amazing thing. They can bring up all kinds of thoughts, memories, right? And they can do all kinds of things, but to remember, nobody in the room is going to say, hey, listen, I don't really need to see my kids anymore. I have pictures, right? Or some of you might want to say that, right? But why? Because pictures are great, right? When the real thing's not there. But the real thing is what you want. It's what you long for. And so when we start, and people are bad about this. All people, I think, are bad about this, is that you begin to substitute that which is real. And the scripture is very clear that God is not visible, and he's told us very clearly not to worship things that are visible things, right? Graven images and all the rest. I can't go down that road. We got to stop. All right. I'm on a clock, by the way, today, all right? And it's not going to work, but it's down here. And because we want to do the Lord's Supper at the end, right? But I want to jump into it today, right? I want you to see it today. And what I'm going to share with you today is extremely simple, right? It's the picture of baptism and the picture of the Lord's Supper, right? And they are pictures. And we'll explain all those things to you right now. So if you have a Bible, look at Romans chapter 5. And there's a passage here, and it has always been my heartbeat and passion. I love sharing what the scripture says. And what is the reality? Let's talk about what the reality is. And then the picture of it's pretty cool, right? It's like Memorial Day. We did a Memorial Day service this past Monday, and I love going to it, and I always share, but I always share this, is that there's a purpose for Memorial Day. It's to remember, right? It's to remember that the freedom which you and I live is that somebody, or a lot of somebodies, have sacrificed so that you and I can be free. That is just the truth. Right? It is just the truth. And you and I need to be reminded. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. Romans chapter 5 and verse 20. Now, Romans, one of my favorite passages, one of my favorite books in the Bible, and there's no way I can talk to you about all of this, but I always like to give you context of why something is being said. And so you kind of have to, chapter 6 is what I want to talk to you about, but let's see why chapter 6 was said. Take a look at chapter 5, verse 20. It says this: now the law came to increase the trespass. So God gave his commands to be able to increase the trespass. In other words, to allow you to understand, right? If you never knew, right? If you never knew what God's law was, then you would never see it, right? So the laws basically shared with us, God's laws basically shared with us, we couldn't follow them, okay? But it says there, where sin increased, grace abounded all the more. So you have this great picture of wherever trespass or wherever sins have increased, God's grace will cover every bit of it, right? No matter what. It's a wonderful teaching. I would love to share it, especially those of you that struggle with forgiveness and other things, but that's not what we're talking about today. But I want you to see why he was about to say what he was going to say, all right? Goes on to say that grace abounded all the more, right? So that as sin reigned in death, wages of sin is death, right? Grace also might reign through righteousness, leading to life, eternal life. So out of death came life, right? All because of God's free gift that you can't earn or deserve, right? That's basically what he's saying. Now, chapter 6. So Paul asks a question. So what do you tell me? I've heard people ask me this today. You know, Jeff, if you tell them it's all about grace, then they'll just go sin all they want to, knowing that God's grace is going to cover it. And this is what Paul asks, right? He asks the question, what shall we say then? Are we just to continue, right? Going wrong, sin, right? So that we can see God's grace abound over it. And he says in verse 2, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And then he makes a statement, and then he gives an illustration. He says, how can we who died to sin still live in it? So what he's saying to you is if you're a believer, if you're his, then there's something different about you. Dead in trespasses and sins, and you've been made alive in Christ. So if you died with Christ, right? He died for you, then how can you continue to go living that direction is basically what he's saying. And then he gives an illustration of what Jesus came to do. Now, this is what I wanted to talk to you about, verse 3. Now, I'm going to read a couple of verses, and then I want to ask you a question. So try your best, focus, right? These next couple of verses, and see what comes to your mind when I read them, all right? Here we go. Verse 3. Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ, Jesus, who were baptized into Christ Jesus, were baptized into his death? We were buried, therefore, with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. Get back up to verse 3. All right? It says there, don't you know that we have all been baptized into Christ Jesus, were baptized into his death? Question mark. Now, I'm here to share something with you that's going to catch you by surprise, because when you see this word right here, all right, my bet is the first thing that comes into your mind is what just happened over there. But he is not talking here about water baptism. I hope you can hear this. All right, the word baptize, it's a Greek word, baptizo, right? And so there was just not enough courage with the translators, especially into English. There was just not enough courage with the translators to translate it. The word baptize means to immerse. It means to sink. It means to, like when a ship sinks, it's baptized, right? It's drawn under, it's surrounded. It's more than just to submerge, it's to be. It's kind of like when I use the sponge up here with the water, right? And I dropped the sponge in, and I pushed in the sponge and let it, the sponge, and let it come out, right? And it went down into the water. That's what the word baptize means. But see, they didn't translate baptize, they transliterated it. So basically, all you have there is a Greek word that most people don't even know what it means. So when you see the word, you immediately think over there. He's not even talking about, look what he says. All right, do you not know that all of us who have been immersed into Christ Jesus were immersed into his death? He's not talking about water. He's talking about what Jesus did in reality, that which the water symbolizes. But this is the reality here. And he's doing it to prove a point that, hey, listen, guys, if your life in Christ, if you're his, your life is changed. And you shouldn't want to go be running after all those other things if you're his. It's a powerful statement. And yet most people have no idea what it means. You know, I can't tell you how many people, there may be people here today, I can't tell you how many people that when you ask them if they're a believer or how they know they're a believer, and they say, well, we've been baptized. And they're not talking about what this says, they're talking about they were in the tank, right? Or the ocean or wherever it was, or sprinkled here or done this or that, and people get all up in arms about all kinds of things when they miss the major point, which is the reality is much more important than the picture. That's a picture of this, right? It's an amazing thing when we look at it, right? Now know that all of us who have been immersed into Christ, you were immersed into his death. That is, he died for you. Look at verse 4. We were buried, therefore, with him by baptism into death. All right, crucified with him. We were buried with him. That is, he died and was buried on our behalf. And he also overcame death on our behalf. And that those who are in Christ, baptized in him, not that, immersed in him, those who are his, right, too might walk newness of life, brand new life. I don't know how in the world, but it has gotten there. I don't know how in the world that somehow that people think that if they go over there or wherever they go and they get wet, that somehow means that they're going to walk in newness of life. Guys, it's not the water that does anything, it's him. He's the reality. That's the symbol. Now, don't hear me minimizing that. Because the awesomeness, if you are truly a believer here today, like those that just did today, they get an opportunity to share with all of you that Christ died for me, he was buried for me, and he overcame death for me, and now I can walk in newness of life. So that is cool. But it's a symbol, right? Don't put your trust in the symbol, but your trust in the reality. How many people today put their trust in all of the icons and the symbols, and they totally lose sight of what the symbols mean, right? Oh, I'm already running. It's still clicking down here. All right, I got to move on. There's a lot more I can say about this, right? Let's just read a little bit more of this passage, and then I've got to move on to the Lord's Supper. All right, here we go. Verse 5, for if we've been united with him in a death like his. See where it says, united with him in a death like his? Therefore, as he died, he was immersed in death, put under, right? Not the water. Get that out of your mind. He was put under in death. Therefore, we've been united with him. Why? Because we put our faith and trust in him. He died on our behalf. So it's this great, wonderful look. So if we've been united with him in his death, we're also going to be united with him in a resurrection like his. That is, when death is overcome. We know that our old self, that is the old Jeff, was crucified with Christ. So you have this great picture that he actually died on your behalf. So this old self, there's a lot more to this, and I don't have time to talk about it, all right? But the old Jeff, I always like to call it the old Jeff, because I remember the old Jeff. I didn't become a believer until I was 21. I remember the old Jeff. I remember how he thought. I remember the things he wanted, right? And I remember the things that he would have done if he thought he could have gotten away with it. I remember that old guy. And he's not totally done away with, but there is something new. Look, so that old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. So it's a setting free. It's pretty cool. For one who has died has been set free from sin. That makes sense. Dead in Christ, he died for you. So again, there's so much more here, right? But if we have died with Christ, we also believe we're going to live with him, and we know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die again. Death no longer has dominion over him, right? For at the death he died to sin once for all, but the life he now lives, he lives to God. So you might consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to Christ Jesus. So what these people over here shared with you is that Christ, I put my faith and trust in who Christ is and his death for me and his burial for me, and then raised to walk in a newness of life. So when they share that with you, they're sharing it with you. But if they have not actually put their faith and trust in Christ, and they're putting their faith and trust in a ceremony, they're not his. You don't trust the ceremony, the picture. You trust Christ. I have prayed, oh Lord, open our eyes and let us see, because we have whole generations of people who have put their faith and trust in either that or the Lord's Supper, which we're about to do in a minute. And they're trusting the symbol and not the reality. We got to move on. All right, we got to move on. Number 2 is the picture of the Lord's Supper. Call it communion. It's called in the Bible the Lord's table. We'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. But I'd like to share with you where that comes from. There's a wonderful picture in the Old Testament called Passover. It is basically the Lord's Supper. Communion is a derivative of Passover. Jesus was actually celebrating the Passover with his disciples when he had it together, right? Let's find out what Passover is. I would give you a few verses. I really would encourage you to read the rest of them. They are pretty cool. But you go back pretty far in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 1. It says, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, it says, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. Imagine that. Hey, something so significant is about to happen. We're going to rearrange the whole calendar. Tomorrow is going to be January 1st, 0001. Does that make sense? So that whole Jewish calendar is built around this event. It's pretty cool, all right? I have to move on. I can't keep telling you all that stuff. All right, here we go. So this month shall be a beginning for us. The first month, it's going to be the first month of the year for you. Imagine me saying, hey guys, today is going to be January 1st. Let me ask you what it is. I've got to move on. Tell all the congregation in Israel that on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take a lamb, Passover lamb, according to of his mouth, according to, let me get back on month, every man shall take a lamb according to his father's house, a lamb for every household. And they shall take some of the blood. What they're going to do, we're going to skip down to verse 7, but they're going to kill it and have it to eat, and then they're going to put the blood on the door frames, right? And that they're going to do. So it's an interesting thing before you eat it. So this Passover lamb, obviously God was going to deliver Israel from their slavery. There's this great picture in the picture here. And Jesus himself says this is a picture in a picture. This Passover lamb who is sacrificed, who is, right, the blood is used, and then what that sacrifice did, and it set them free from their slavery. There's parallels that Jesus is trying to make here. That's why when he had the Last Supper, the last Passover with his disciples, he explained it to them. But let's continue this, all right? And skip down now, if you will, to verse 11. In the manner that you shall eat it, you shall have your belt fastened, right? Your sandals on your feet, staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. Now look at verse 13. The blood shall be a sign to you. So even way back then when the instructions were given, there's something to this, right? This blood on the door, more than just what it did at the time. I mean, why all of this stuff? Why go through all this stuff? Why can't God just deliver them? And in other words, why can't God just keep them from going into slavery in the first place? I don't know. Not God, neither are you, so I'm not going there. But this was all here for a picture, right? All here for a picture. It's going to be a sign for you. And basically, if I see the blood on the door, the plague will pass over you when I strike Egypt, all right? Now look at verse 14. This day shall be a what? A memorial day. Okay, we just had one Monday. Set aside a day to do what? To remember. The purpose of Memorial Day is to remember, period. We've made it a whole lot of other things, but the veterans have told me when I first got here, Jeff, this is not Veterans Day, this is Memorial Day, right? This is a day to remember those who have sacrificed. Same thought here. It's a Memorial Day, right, for the Jewish folks, the day that God delivered them from their slavery, lest we forget. Humans are real bad about forgetting. What have you done for me lately? I have found that memorials, pictures, remind us. It helps perspective. Perspective is an amazing thing. And when we lose perspective, we almost always get self-centered. And we get self-centered, we almost always make terrible decisions, right? Perspective. Interesting. So you shall observe this. Skip down to verse 24. You're going to observe this now forever. And they still are. Isn't it amazing? Our Jewish friends. And when you come to the land the Lord's going to give you that he promised, you shall keep this service. In other words, you're going to do this memorial. Why? Verse 26, because when your children say, why are we doing this? Why are we eating bitter herbs and all this salt water and all this stuff? I don't know if you've ever had a Seder supper. Okay, it's not the tastiest of meals, right? But it's not meant to be. It's symbolic. It's what it means. It's powerful when you understand every portion of what it means, right? But when your children start asking you, why are you doing this? Verse 27, it's because God set us free by his strong and mighty right arm from our slavery. And we don't want to forget. And boy, whenever Israel forgot, they started griping about not having enough variety in the food. They'd lost sight of that God had delivered them from slavery. It's incredible, isn't it? Perspective. So this is what all this stuff is. Really, we only have two things now. Baptism, and then you only do that once for yourself, but then Lord's Supper, that's something that we do on a regular basis. All right? So you shall tell them it's the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover and all the rest. Now, in 1 Corinthians 11, all right, got a couple more things I want to do, right? And then we'll do. So when you think about Lord's Supper and communion, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 23, I talk about this often, right? So this is not going to be new information for you, but it's going to be important for you to understand, right? This is what he says, for I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, he took bread, right? And when he given thanks, he broke it. He said, this is my body, do this in what? Okay, what were they celebrating? They were celebrating Passover. What was Passover? Passover was a celebration of memory to remember of the Jewish people when they were set free from their slavery. Well, Jesus is saying, listen, this unleavened bread you've been eating, it's a picture. It's who I am. It's me. It's huge to think that out of those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, that the Passover could be a symbol and a picture of who Christ is and what he came to do. That's what it says here. And just like they've been celebrating Passover for thousands of years now, that we're going to celebrate to remember. Remember. It's a symbol, right? It's a memory. It's a Memorial Day. There's no reality to it. It's just for memory's sake, right? And I find it interesting that when he'd given thanks, he broke it, symbolizing a break, that himself that's broken for you, therefore he gave thanks for the broken. There's a lot more there, but there's not time to. I just like for you to know, hey, listen, there's a lot more there I don't have time to tell you about, right? Verse 25, in the same way, he took the cup after the supper and he said, this cup is the new covenant, right, commitment, in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it. What? In crowd participation time. In? Okay, so it's remembered. He tells you what it's for. And yet, how is it that we can mess it up? Right? We can mess it up. Somehow we attach all kinds of things to it. But I just like for you to know what the scripture says about it. Right? But it is purely a remembrance thing. What you're about to do here in a minute is meant for remembrance. Right? For as often as you eat the bread and drink the cup, here's another purpose. Not just remembrance, but look at this. You proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So there's a picture of who Christ is and what he came to do. Die, right? Sacrifice, risen. There's a picture of that found in Passover. That's what Paul's saying here. It's pretty cool when you think about it. Right? Whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and blood of the Lord. I'll let Aaron take care of that in a minute. Just like this one, let a person examine himself. I'll let Aaron, he does do this in just a minute. Therefore, don't just walk into this haphazardly. Remember why you're doing what you're doing. If the purpose is remembrance, then the way to do it in a worthy manner is to remember, right? Now, I won't steal his thunder there, right? Now, so we have this wonderful Lord's Supper. So just a few words I want to throw at you. Number one is communion, right? Number one is communion. All right, when you look at the word, oh, y'all are way behind, guys. Way behind. That's back at the beginning. There we go. All right. Communion, all right? Communion. I love for you to understand things, right? Com, C-O-M, just means with, like the word compassion. Com is with, passion is to suffer. The word compassion means to suffer with. So when you have compassion on someone, you're just not having pity, you're actually getting in it with them. Compassion is an awesome word. Communion, well, com's with, what is the word union? Together. The word community, right? Right, therefore unity with everyone in unity. It's the same concept. So communion, right, Lord's Supper is not to be done by yourself. It's to be done in fellowship with fellow believers. Celebrated, remembered together. It's an amazing thing when you think about it, right? I just wanted you to know. Number two, this is what I want you to think on, and this is kind of how I'm going to close. Picture versus reality. Picture versus reality. Now understand that when we make pictures reality, that's when we really get into trouble. But I want you to understand the incredible importance of pictures, right? To remembering. Right? I have some pictures. I have some pictures I want to share with you. Martha and I, this is just the way my brain works. We were going through a bunch of pictures, and I kept thinking to myself, what do I want to title today? And I just didn't want to explain these things to you because most of you know, unleavened bread is the body of Christ, who he is, what he came to do, all that. But what I wanted you to see today is point, is purpose. And what is the purpose of a picture? And pictures are all about, and so we started going through our pictures, a lot of our pictures. And guys, I have to be honest, I am not a big picture guy. I don't like people taking them of me very often. I mean, I don't know if you stop by here, that's wonderful, but my family, again, you got to remember my family, they are all about pictures. We got to take a picture about just about everything, right? And so we started going through them because I wanted to share with you today what this means. All right, so I got a handful of pictures here with you. All right, put them up here. All right, can you put them up there too? There you go. All right. Now this is the guys in our family, and again, I was looking at this and when I looked down at it, all kinds of things swelled back in. And since I'm one that doesn't look at these things often, they have an impact. All right, so obviously me, unshaven, and this is my brother, right? My two nephews, my son, and then this is my dad, right? This was his 80th birthday. And it was the last one, right? He didn't make it but another, 5 months, 6 months. But what I remember about that day is because he had memory issues. right? We all know what we're talking about. Some sort of memory problems. But this was a good day. Do y'all remember? If y'all know what I'm talking about, that they have good days and bad days when they go through Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever it is he actually had, but it was fairly pronounced. But this was a good day. And my sister-in-law bought him a cake, a Tennessee cake, right, if you see it? And when you cut into it, it was orange and white checkerboard on the cake, all right? And I was just so grateful. I was just so grateful that it was the perfect day. One of the last ones we all had together with him, with us. Hadn't thought about that in a long time, but what do pictures do? They bring them up. They bring up memories, right? Why? Because it's so easy to forget, right? Right? Give you a couple more that aren't as heavy as that one. This is a first grandchild, right? We were having our staff retreat here. We were up at Crystal River. We were having all those meetings all day long, right? And y'all know I love meetings. And it was wonderful. We got the call, right? Sarah's in labor, so we got in the car. We had to leave all those meetings. And we drove up to Raleigh, North Carolina, right? And after we drove the entire way from here to Raleigh, it was probably a handful of hours, and then this little girl was born. It was just sweet. But it, believe it or not, it brings memories just like you wouldn't believe. The next one, this is the second granddaughter. This is Phoebe. Now, I had her in this service a few weeks ago. If some of y'all remember her, she came out in a little dress, and she is a Spitfire brother. She's just one of those kids. Remember, she walked out here and just didn't have a problem. And I asked her, and I said, Phoebe, how old are you? And she looks, and I'm 4 years old, and she told everybody, make sure that everybody knew she was 4. But she's something else, right? Just what this picture reminds me of is we're on a 4-wheeler. We have some family land out there, and so we got on that 4-wheeler, and we took off across pasture. Now, that's not talking about being on concrete where it's even. Pasture is like this. And they call me Pop, all right? I'm Pop, in case you want to know. And and as we're moving along, faster, Pop, faster, Now, her older sister, she's only 3 at this pace. Her older sister is freaking out when I touch the gas at all. So what is it that makes a kid different? I don't know, but she is a daredevil, brother. She'll climb to the ceiling if you let her. And so it's just a memory, a fun memory to remember, right? All right, I only have about 15 more, all right? Now, some of you roll your eyes, and remember that if the picture doesn't have anything to do with you, you eventually are going to get bored. For those of you who have ears to hear. If the pictures don't have, it's like watching somebody else's home movies, right? If the picture doesn't have anything to do with you, you eventually will get bored. Last one. This is our wedding picture, right? And this is me. And what's the most amazing thing is I haven't changed over the years. Everybody else has gotten older. Look at me. I just haven't changed. Anyway, so we hadn't looked at this. I hadn't looked at this in 25 years. We've been married 33. I mean, we pulled out this album, and I had to unstick it to get it out of the album. All right, y'all know what I'm talking about. It's been in there so long, and so, let me tell you what this did. So I hadn't seen it in 25 years. It was amazing, right? Obviously Martha and I, but we're not going to go with us. I want to show you some of those. This here was our pastor. His name was Adrian Rogers, and he's actually still on television, even though he's been gone for 15 years. But I don't know that there's anyone else in this life who's had more impact on Martha and myself than this man here. He had a way of communicating the scriptures. It's where I became a believer, because I've been in church all my life, but he made it so clear and so plain. Thank God for him and his love for the scriptures. And I hear myself say stuff he used to say. He used to say that the most miserable person in the world is not the lost person. The most miserable person in the world is the believer who's not living for Christ. And that is, I hear myself say, okay, I've got to move on. But that came all flashing back when I looked at him, right? Of course, everybody has a story, right? But, and then all of this other unnecessary stuff. And so, but this is where I want to close. I mean, obviously, it reminds me with Martha and I where we began. I mean, I don't have to be reminded that we have a wonderful marriage and wonderful relationship. So that doesn't, believe it or not, that doesn't stick out as much to me on this picture, because we just do. We always have. So, but the one I want to finish with is this guy here. His name is Todd, and probably one of the best friends I ever had. He was my roommate at the athletic dorm. We'd known each other all our lives. Our dads played football together in high school and college. In fact, his dad played for the Buffalo Bills, I don't know, for 9 seasons, 10 seasons. And anyway, so he developed multiple sclerosis, and if some of you have that, don't be alarmed, because it comes in all variants, but he got a real bad one, and I don't know, he was gone a few years after this, first funeral I ever did. But looking at this picture, I kind of jumped on this one, and then I went to Todd. You can see that he's sick here if you look close enough. And I don't know, just a whole lot of memories and how this impacted his life, and he not only became a believer, but began to grow, which I'm not sure that would even happened, you know? And so guys, what I'm trying to say is that remember, memories. So what is the Lord's Supper? It's a memory. It's for your remembrance. Remembering who Christ is, what he came to do, remembering the day in your life that you were convicted, remembering the difference that he's made in your life. But remember this, if it's not one of your pictures, the time we're about to have is going to be boring to you, right? It's like looking at somebody else's pictures, right? That's why I love the Lord's Supper, right? I really do. I love the Lord. Let me tell you why I love the Lord's Supper. Is because it's not dependent on me. It's not dependent on Aaron. It's dependent on your relationship, right? And if it's not a big deal to you, or if it's not part of your pictures, then you're just going to be going, listen, you're just going to be going through religious motions. But if it's you, it'll stir up something. Just the way it does. Isn't it incredible how it works? So take that off now, kid. All right. So as I close, we're about to celebrate together. Remember, the purpose is to remember. To remember, right? Remember who he is. Remember what he's done, not only for the world, but for you. Because if your life hasn't been changed, then it's just going to be another monotonous time. But if it's a picture that you're in, it will have impact. Am I making sense? So as we close, that's really, again, what I wanted to share with you today. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll ask our deacons and ushers and those who are helping. You can go ahead and prepare, and then Aaron will share with you in just a minute. Let me pray for us. Lord, thank you so much. God, thank you so much for your love for us. And God, thank you for this time. And my prayer, God, is that your presence will be here as we celebrate this together. And Lord, if somebody doesn't know you, maybe it's the first time they've realized that these are just symbols and they've been trusting symbols and not you. Lord, I pray that you'll let them see that today. So Lord, if anything good's happened here today, Lord, we know it's because of you. And Lord, we pray this in Jesus' name. And everyone said, amen. God bless you.